Lap cars must overtake the safety car.
I put out the call on social media the other day asking for you guys to share with me your Formula One rule changes to make Formula One great again. And man, did you guys deliver. There was over 300 comments across platforms. Admittedly, half of these were about V10 engines, so we'll call it 150 ideas. So what I'm going to do today is react to them and rank them on a scale of what I like to call win or bin. Yes, I did come up with that all by myself. It took me all night, but I'm very proud of it. And at the end of the video, I'm going to put all the meme ones, the funny ones, the silly ones, so stay tuned for that. So up first, we have got unbanned swearing. Now, I am 100% in agreement here. The drivers have obviously come out themselves and said that they're not particularly happy with the FIA's involvement with the swearing ban. Our sport is high adrenaline, it's high risk, drivers are pushing you off the track. It's only normal to expect that drivers are going to use some colourful language at times. Or if you're Yuki Tsunoda, all of the time. Unban driver swearing, that's a win. Next up, someone wants to ban DRS, ERS, and any method of making the car quicker on the straights. This is because they want to see racing on the straights as well as in the corners. I'm not quite sure how to break it to you, mate, but I don't think that getting rid of DRS or ERS is going to make the overtaking better. I think that may have the opposite effect to what you're hoping. I feel like the new regulations that came out in 2022 have gone a long way to help overtaking in the sport, but I feel like there's still quite a ways to go before we start taking away DRS. So that one's going in the bin. Next up is to remove sprint race weekend. I know that some people do enjoy the sprint race weekends, but for me, I just can't really get behind them that much. I mean, when it was introduced, I was quite open to the idea. I thought, I don't want to start saying anything before we see it. Let's see it in action first. And maybe it's good, maybe it's not. I feel like the regular weekend format that we've got of practice 1, 2, and 3, qualifying, then the race, the build-up, the crescendo to the race on Sunday afternoon is perfect to me. But on the sprint race weekends, it feels like we've got a practice and then a qualifying, then another qualifying, then we've got a race, then we've got qualifying, then another race, and then I feel like I don't know where I am. The race it doesn't feel fluid. It's just strange to me. And obviously, yes, a practice session is more boring than a sprint race, but I would still prefer to just keep every race weekend the original format. So that's a win from me. Next up is also about the sprint races. So if we are going to keep them, I think this would be a good idea. And that is to add a reverse grid sprint qualifying. This is similar to what we see in categories like Formula 3 and Formula 2, where I suppose you would have practice 1 and 2 on the Friday like we normally do. Saturday morning, we would then have a qualifying session. Then on Saturday afternoon, we would reverse the top 10. Not all of the drivers. I think reversing the whole grid might be a bit farcical, and maybe that opens it up to people just purposefully qualifying last so that they start on pole for the sprint race and try and get some points. I don't think that would be a good idea. So reverse just the top 10 the same way as they do in Formula 3, Formula 2. And then obviously on Sunday, it's just the race as we've always had it. So if we do have to keep sprint race weekends, that's a win. Next up is to bring back the Pirelli rainbow tyre format. For those of you who may not have been watching back in sort of 2016, 2017, instead of just having the 3 tyre compounds, the soft, the medium, the hard, Pirelli had 7 different tyre compounds. It was something like the super hard, the medium, the soft, the super soft, the ultra soft, the hyper soft. Is that 7? I think that's 7. And that may be confusing for newer fans if we suddenly jump from 3 tyre compounds to 7, but I think that's a wicked idea. I feel like the tyre strategy is quite boring at the moment. How often do we see drivers, everyone starts on the medium, and then about lap 20, everyone puts the hards on and then we go to the end. But can you imagine if there was 7 different tyre compounds at every race weekend? It would be amazing for the strategy. And before you start commenting about it's not logistically possible, it's bad for this, it's bad for that, that's not what this video is about. It's a bit of fun. Just enjoy this silly man talking about the silly little world of Formula 1. So that's a win. Next up is the fastest lap point for every driver on the grid, not just the top 10. Now this is an interesting one because I understand that if someone in 12th place gets the fastest lap, they still did the fastest time, so the point should go to them. But I feel like the problem with that is it makes the point maybe less meaningless in a way. If you think to George Russell, for example, in 2019, 2020, 2021, wasn't able to score a point because the Williams was an absolute tractor. But then when he finally scored points at Hungary, it was this big moment. And I feel like if you haven't scored a point in Formula 1 yet, and you could just chuck the soft tyres on at the end and get fastest lap, and obviously fastest lap is going for next year, so yeah. Personally, I'm quite glad that it's going. I was never a huge fan of the fastest lap. I think it's always been a bit farcical. I think the original idea was to get drivers pushing all the way to the end, but I think instead what you have happen is that people manage their tyres the way they always have. And then whichever driver happens to have a 20-second window behind them to pit, they just pit for the softs and then they get the point. So that one's going in the bin. Get out of here. What's next? Lap cars must overtake the safety car. Yeah, I'm not touching that one. Next up is the ahead at the apex. This is the Max Verstappen's signature move at the moment. So obviously this is where you're going into a corner up against a driver on the outside and you brake a bit later than you maybe should. Ease off the brakes, roll the car into the apex, make sure you're ahead. And then when you both inevitably go off, you claim I was ahead at the apex and you stay ahead. And for anyone that gets mad at Max Verstappen for doing this, I understand why you don't want to see racing like that. But he is just playing to the rulebook and he's playing it perfectly. He's allowed to do this. He's not doing anything wrong in the rulebook. It's in the regulations. But for me personally, I prefer to see racing on the track than off it. So for me, that's a win. Next up, we have got to remove the mandatory tyre stop. So essentially, it's just the teams can run any tyre at any point in the race. They can pit, they don't have to. I don't really see what this is going to add to the sport. If you've got a driver starting on hards and going to mediums compared to starting on hards and finishing on hards, I don't really see what that's adding to the sport. Can you just imagine at Monaco, everyone starts on the hard tyre, they don't pit, we all finish in the exact order. No, get in the bin. If you made it this far through the video, please consider dropping a like or a subscribe. Thank you. Next up, we have more sprint races. Bin. Does anyone actually want more sprints? No, man, no one wants more sprints. Team owner and driver cannot be related / ban pay drivers. I'm not sure who this is aimed at exactly, but I don't really know how we're going to enforce it. Imagine a team owner just happens to have an absolute prodigy of a driving son, the greatest driver we've ever seen, the greatest on the earth. He wins everything in go-karts, Formula 4, Formula 3, Formula 2, gets to Formula 1 and they're like, nah mate, sorry, can't join. Just because you come from money or with money doesn't always mean you're going to be bad. A lot of the time it does. We all know who we all know. But let's just take Max Verstappen for an example here, okay? Max Verstappen is not a paid driver, obviously. But being the son of an ex-racing driver, he did have a lot of money going up. I'm sure Max had no problem finding sponsorships, buying all the best equipment he needed. Max having a rich dad certainly would have helped his career. But he's not a paid driver. But his dad definitely would have helped him throughout his career. So I don't know how we can enforce that exactly, or how you fully define what a pay driver is, but I do get exactly what you're going for. But since we can't enforce it, going in a bin. Moving on, we have got remove track limits. Now, I'm not sure how extreme this is meant to be taken. I mean, I don't know if you can just get to a sequence of corners like Maggots and Beckett's and just floor it straight through. I'm guessing that this is more to do with track times getting deleted for going over by this much across the white line. Obviously, no one likes when their favourite driver gets a qualifying time deleted, or a 5-second penalty in the race for going over a tiny little white line they probably can't even see. You could always add self-policing track limits like gravel traps or grass, but that would also affect a lot of other categories. MotoGP particularly, they like a lot of runoff, which in Formula 1 we don't like. So I'm sorry, that one has to go in the bin as well. Moving on now to some of the more meme-worthy and funny F1 rule changes we could see. Let's take a look at some of those. Right, ban the FIA, ban the FIA, ban the FIA, ban the FIA. I know there was talks about Formula 1 being more self-governed at some point. I don't know if this is particularly realistic, but I think it would be cool to see if it happens. The only problem is that I'm sure the issues that people have would still come up. I think something that would massively help here is having permanent stewards, either a single set of stewards that go to every race, or maybe 2 that can alternate every other weekend. That way we'd have a lot more consistency in the decisions made, but that could also open up a whole separate issue if stewards have a certain bias for or against a certain driver. If, for example, you've got a steward that hates Max Verstappen and that hates any sort of aggressive racing, they can be very unfair with the penalties they choose to give. But this is the same in pretty much every sport there is. The refereeing is never always perfect. There's always people that are going to agree and disagree with the decisions made. Unfortunately, I think that is just an intrinsic part of sport. Next up, we've got no more 10-second penalty for Esteban Ocon. Now, I am absolutely for this. It's now 20 seconds. Can we leave Esteban Ocon alone? Has this man not suffered enough having to drive that absolute lorry of an Alpine this year? Next up is to ban Lance Stoll from entering the paddock. I had quite a few of these, along with a couple of banned Sergio Perez, but he's now been fired, so we don't need to ban terrors anymore. I'm sorry, they're going to hate me for that, aren't they? And finally, one of my favourites is to remove penalties, remove the safety car, remove the virtual safety car, remove yellow flags, and remove red flags. Basically, safety has left the chat. I've got no idea how long a race would go on before every car's in the bin. I can only assume this commenter was trying to be funny. I'm sure he doesn't actually want to see all the safety features leave the sport. There we have it. Thank you so much for watching. I did have a bunch more comments, but this video is already going to be quite long, so I don't want to make it even longer for you guys. But if you did like it enough, let me know in the comments and I could do a part 2 next. And if you did enjoy the video, please drop a like, a comment, or subscribe. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on the video. This is a bit different to what I normally make on the channel that's about 4 weeks old, but yes, still it's different to the other videos I've made. But this has been a really funny one. This is video number 6, I believe. And we are currently on 768 subscribers, so thank you so much for that, guys. That is absolutely insane. I'd love to hit 1,000 before New Year's. That would be wicked. Apparently, my subscribers versus non-subscribers is 98.5% not subscribed. Mate, if you're not subscribed, man, please check if you are. 90, I've never seen someone so high. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.